Good morning for the Canadians, good afternoon for our viewers and participants from London, UK, and good evening at Dhaka, Bangladesh. On behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I welcome all of you to the 26th episode of this webinar. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute facilitates dialogue among scholars, practitioners, and policymakers on key global and local conflict issues and peace-building measures. Our important research project is Rohingya crisis and its peaceful and sustainable resolution. In this regard, so far we have arranged 8 sessions where we exchange ideas on peace-building measures for conflict transformation. Before we begin, as a tradition, let me do the treaty recognition. Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada is located on original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dakota, and Dene peoples, and on the homeland of Métis Nation. We respect the treaties that were made on these territories, we acknowledge the harms and mistakes of the past, and we dedicate ourselves to move forward in partnership with Indigenous communities in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. Our today's main theme of the session is Rohingya crisis and what international communities can do. To set the context of today's session, we all know the evolving situation in Myanmar due to the military takeover on 1st of February, and through which Tatmadaw appended years of quasi-democratic rule in Myanmar led by Aung San Suu Kyi and her National League for Democracy. In an official statement, Tatmadaw leaders justified the takeover by alleging voter fraud in the 2020 November election, where NLD had won in a landslide. The civilian leaders of Myanmar and NLD were detained by the Tatmadaw along with dozens of officials, lawmakers, and aides. In the meantime, as civil resistance grew, twice the internet blackout occurred, and that barred international communities to keep track on the matters happening in the streets of Yangon. Although Tatmadaw leaders affirmed that foreign policy and Rohingya repatriation would not change, yet we observed the ongoing bilateral talks between Myanmar and Bangladesh was cancelled, or rather postponed. As we speak, nearly 1.1 million Rohingyas are stranded in Bangladesh, and around 600,000 of them are still in Myanmar in IDP camps and elsewhere. While the United Nations convened Special Security Council session to condemn the event, and some of the countries started issuing sanctions, no effective actions to discourage Tatmadaw to continue their rule for at least 1 year has yet to happen. And China consistently backs up Myanmar by saying that it is an internal issue of Myanmar. On the regional front, except Singapore, no other ASEAN members actually expressed their condemnation on this issue. So today, within the general theme that I mentioned earlier, we would like to find answers from our esteemed panelists, like what are the driving factors behind the military coup d'etat? Does Myanmar have a long-term future as a democratic country? What response should be expected from international community? And what are the implications for regional stability in Southeast Asia? And last but not the least, what do you foresee about the repatriation possibility of Rohingyas from Bangladesh? And now, ladies and gentlemen, it's a distinct honor to introduce our panelists today. And we have our special guest today joining from Ottawa, Canada, the Honourable High Commissioner of Bangladesh in Canada. And his name is Dr. Khalillur Rahman. And he had number of international and national responsibilities before he assumed his current responsibility. And one of these was former Director Non-Communicable Diseases and Environmental Health in World Health Organization. And he was also stationed in Bangkok. Before arriving in Canada, he was also the chief coordinator of COVID-19 response in Bangladesh. Next, we have Honourable Member of Parliament from Labour for Hornsby and Wood Green and Shadow Foreign Minister Catherine West. And we are absolutely honored because she is also Europe and America's response minister in the opposition. And then we have Mr. Shahidul Haque, and he is the just former Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, and now he is a professional fellow at the North South University in Bangladesh and advisor on migration and humanitarian policy of International Office of Migration in Bangladesh. He served his tenure as a Foreign Secretary between January 2013 and 2019, and as you might recall now, he was one of the pioneers dealing with Rohingya crisis as it unfolded at that time. And lastly, we have Khin. He is the president Burmese Rohingya organization in the UK and one of the lead organizations amongst Rohingya diasporas in the world. He is a very known figure. He has come to our sessions a number of times, and we look forward to hearing more from him about Rohingyas and their aspirations in the future. So without further ado, let me start the session. And as I mentioned earlier, we'd go in a chronology. First, I would like to invite Honourable High Commissioner for Bangladesh in Canada, Dr. Khalillur Rahman, to start, and then we'll follow the sequence as we have just discussed. Ladies and gentlemen, the Honourable High Commissioner, Dr. Khalillur Rahman. So kindly unmute the mic, please.
Connecting me with this, panel, and I think I am the new player in this kind of discourse because I was never, involved in any kind of talk on Rohingya issues because my work area was different when I was working in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But I'm very happy, my former boss, the Foreign Secretary of Bangladesh, is here. It was him under whom I came back to the ministry from WHO, so I worked under him. And I'm happy that he's here because he's the person who knows how this, total episode unfolded. Unfortunately, when he was at the helm, so that is one thing, always come to my mind that, he presided over this, this influx from Myanmar. I think he was, I think not one of he was the main, person who was deeply involved in management and in the whole issue of Rohingya influx and the repatriation process. So I think he should be and is aware of all the issues related to Rohingya. So my position now as High Commissioner in Canada, basically I would see how Canada would be involved more in this in the resolution of Rohingya crisis. And as we know, Bangladesh is a democratic country. We believe in democratic process and constitutional continuity. What has happened in Myanmar this month is definitely unfortunate, but we may not or should not forget the fact that Myanmar is a country that has been run by army. Either directly or indirectly. And if we look at the recent development that happened from 2016, it was basically the so-called democratic dispensation when Aung San Suu Kyi was, I should say, de facto leader of the government. And if we look at the number, out of 1.1 million Rohingyas now, in Bangladesh, 800,000 came during hard time. So I personally don't think that this takeover by army would make any difference. And if we look at the history, I will see that what happened from late 70s until 2005. Most of the Rohingyas were repatriated who came in different phases. But whoever came during Suki's time, nobody has gone back yet. Only few numbers maybe. So that is the point I would like to make. So when this international community is clamoring against this army takeover, we also want Bangladesh being a democratic country, following the principle of friendship to all, malice to none. We also want to see democratic process continues everywhere in the world. And we want to see this democratic process, returns to Myanmar. But Bangladesh is of the view that whatever happened or whatever happens, we will remain engaged with the regime in Myanmar, whether it is army or democratic, so-called disguised democratic regime. And the issue of repatriation must not be forgotten. Because if you look at the statement of the international community, I think almost all of them, they never included the issue of repatriation while condemning this army takeover. So the issue of repatriation, as early as possible, must not be forgotten by the international community while we work with the Myanmar regime for the return of democracy in the country. I have 10 minutes time, but let me just make a few very concrete points, because I know all of you know what happened in Myanmar, what happened over the last few decades in terms of this Rohingya influx, the persecution, genocide in Rakhine State, and their influx to Bangladesh, and what is happening in the repatriation process. We are working with the international community, and we will continue our work with them, including Canada, for the early repatriation of the Rohingyas to Myanmar. We had a meeting, this tripartite meeting, I think on 19th of January last month. But now I don't know when the next meeting can take place. But our point is very clear. We are ready to engage with the Myanmar regime, and so that these Rohingyas can go back there. And as I said, we also think that it is possible, even with this army regime. I mean, if we look at the history, as I said, it was always possible. This repatriation took place when the army control was pervasive. I mean, the army controlled and run the country. So it can be possible, and it should be possible like in the past. And international community must not forget this issue of repatriation, that efforts should be made to also talk about repatriation. If you look at the Security Council statement, originally they wanted not to refer to the repatriation in the statement, but finally it has now been included in the statement. So I think from there, the international community should work with the Myanmar regime and also with Bangladesh, that this repatriation takes place as early as possible. I think that international community now can consider seriously working in certain areas, that is accountability. They should come very heavily on the regime, on the government of Myanmar now, that how this ICC ordered provisional measures to Myanmar to prevent this genocide in Rakhine can be continued. How the international community can support the case brought out by Gambia against Myanmar in ICJ. It is not only moral support or ethical support, we also want financial contribution so that this case can go in a long way, and we can see it as a very effective medium for the resolution of the crisis. And we also think that once the ICC comes up with their findings on the crime against humanity by the regime and by the dispensation Myanmar, and that should be taken also seriously by the international community to make the Myanmar regime accountable and to do whatever needed for the early resolution of the crisis. I also think that like what happened in Argentina, Mr. Khin is here. The Rohingya diaspora and the human rights organization in different countries, including in Canada, I really encourage them to just go to the court and file a case against Myanmar on the principle of universal jurisdiction. That is possible, and the Rohingya diaspora should do that. My last point is that as I said, Bangladesh believes in working with each and everybody. We believe in friendship to all, malice to none, and we think that Myanmar can be a very, very good partner for Bangladesh in flourishing business, because we are neighbor, we just resolved this sea dispute a few years ago. Forensic was at the helm. I also like to thank him for guiding this, I mean, for the resolution of this issue. So we can work together and both the countries can benefit. We never had any major irritant between these two countries except these Rohingya issues. So once we can resolve it, both the countries can really develop very fast, because even Myanmar can be a gateway for Bangladesh, for Southeast Asia and China. So we can work with them very closely, and we want to work with them very closely. But this major irritant, the only issue, should be resolved. And lastly, that is what I like to propose, that CRRIC and maybe Ambassador Shahidul organization or university. And I also spoke with John Packer, I think last week. I had a 45 minutes talk with him. I think now it is time to make a study, the itemized loss on the part of Bangladesh due to Rohingya crisis. So what happened, what kind of harm has been taken place, or has taken place in terms of environment, in terms of the sufferings of the local community, in terms of our development, in terms of our burden in the area of health, in the area of environment, in the area of development, in the area of law and order situation. So all should be costed. Today, many UN agencies come to the government of Bangladesh, do this, do that, but they have never been able to exert the same pressure on Myanmar. They don't have any access to Rakhine state, and in Bangladesh they can go anywhere. We invite them to visit each and every camps. So this is one thing that the UN system now should come up, because if we talk about, even they never talk about this environmental destruction in Bangladesh. We have allocated 7,000 acre land in Teknam, in Cox's Bazar. Now we have given them a very beautiful another camp, that is Bhasan Char, for better living, for decongested living, where every facility is there. And I'm happy to see that is Rohingyas are now going even on a voluntary basis to live there, and they are very happy over there. So this study should be done, and I propose that CRRIC and North South University, and I want Professor Shahidul Haque. I think he sometimes it comes to my mind that he should be professor in a university. And Professor John Packer also agreed with me that yes, I will be happy to be part of this study. That's why I was saying that a Canadian parliamentarian should have been here, because what Canadians know is that Canada is helping a lot. Bangladesh, yes, they are helping. Their main help is on the out of the 4 objectives. This one objective, the humanitarian areas. But we want them to do more to make sure that these people are accountable by supporting the case in ICJ, and also working with the international community to complete the Myanmar regime to create a secure, healthy, sustainable environment in Rakhine state, so that these Rohingyas can go back to their homeland, Rakhine state in Myanmar, to live there peacefully, and they can take part in the development process of Myanmar. So I think I stop here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much for your insights. I think you have touched quite a broad landscape and suggested some of the future items that the United Nations and others can pursue. So, dear audience, now it's time to welcome our Honourable Member of Parliament from the UK, Catherine West, to have her ideas shared with us. And we'll be very much curious to know what United Kingdom is planning to do in the future. Honourable Member of Parliament, floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, and it's a delight to follow His Excellency, the High Commissioner, and to hear from Bangladeshi key players what the view is from Dhaka. It's a tragic situation, what is happening in Myanmar, and it will be adding to the grief and the loss that so many in Cox's Bazar are feeling. I wanted to put on record the widespread recognition for Bangladesh of the work that's being done in Cox's Bazar, and as the UK is one of the second most involved partners in the region, to put on record the widespread commitment from parliamentarians, both in the House of Commons and in the House of Lords, for the important work that's going on. My colleague, Dr. Rosanna Alian Khan, visited the Cox's Bazar last year and the year before. She's a general practitioner, and she was able to volunteer with one of the agencies and really bring back a first-hand account of what needed to be done there on the spot. And I'm so pleased that we can work together with Canada, with Australia, with many others who are committed to finding a solution through this crisis, which has really doubled in the last couple of weeks since the military coup in Burma. Obviously, as Labor members of Parliament, we're particularly committed to the human rights agenda and calling out violations where they do exist. We want to hold the Myanmar government and the military to account over the grave human rights abuses. And we've stood firmly against all of the violations, which, as the panel will know, do include the horrifying Gu Da Pien massacre in August 2017, the blocking of the Rohingya citizenship rights, including the right to vote in elections, and the ban against Rohingyas being able to stand as candidates in the election in November 2020. We feel that we could do even more, and that's why, as the Shadow Ministry, we are putting even more pressure onto the UK government to stand up against the Myanmar government and to support the Rohingya. So, for example, we have called on the UK government to formally support the Gambia's case of genocide against Myanmar at the International Court of Justice, following in the footsteps of Canada and the Netherlands by offering legal expertise. We will continue to do that. We also had an urgent question in Parliament the week before last, and we were told that adding to the already existing sanctions against certain individuals at the top of the government, at the top of the military, who were really taking money from the people. And we've asked our government to look again at even more individuals who may be trying to take money out of the country and to invest it outside the country in a corrupt way. And indeed, the government has brought forward more individuals, and there are now 16 people who are sanctioned by the UK government. Now, the reason why we're particularly pleased about that is that we know that the UK government and the UK financial system has a lot of influence globally. And therefore, if our financial system can be tighter against the use of money flows in and out from Myanmar, then we can discourage this sort of military action. So we've also called on the government to extend the ban on selling arms to Myanmar. There was a consideration at one point of lifting the ban because obviously once Dorsu was elected as the leader and there appeared to be a civil government in place, some of our MPs felt it might be appropriate to lift the ban on military expertise so that some partnerships could be developed. But I'm very pleased that that ban has continued, particularly in the light of the troubles in the last few weeks. We've also asked that our government work with the Bangladeshi government to ensure that the safeguarding of Rohingya population who have fled to Cox's Bazar, that they will continue to receive what they need, including medical aid, including psychological help, including education for children, services for women, and any work possibilities that there could be for adults in the camps. And what we want to do going forward is to work with the international community on those 3 points. First of all, making sure that the UK government is not allowing any corruption or misuse of funds. Secondly, that the UK government is exploring any legal avenues which may be possible through the International Court of Justice. And thirdly, continuing our assistance. And I do hope that when we have our question and answer later on today, that we'll get a bit of a sense of what further action can be taken. We know that the UK has a good knowledge of the region. We have a good relationship with the countries around Myanmar, and we know that today's announcement that there will be fresh elections held by the military is perhaps something that we can ask more questions of, because obviously we want to know, will the court case which the military have begun against Dorsu continue, or will they allow her to stand as a candidate, or will they expect different candidates from the military to stand? We need to know exactly what the announcement means. At the moment, it's still very much breaking news, but there may be members of the panel today who have a little bit more of an insight into what that means, and depending on the meaning of that, what we can push for. Because fresh elections may be one thing, but if they're fresh elections but certain candidates are barred from standing, then that's not a free or fair election. And I think that could lead to more young people taking to the streets, showing their anger, and also more trouble in the medium to long term. I also wanted just briefly to touch on the issue of information and disinformation. We know that the role of the big tech companies is crucial. We would like to see the responsible use of the internet in the region. We know, for example, that it was shortly after the internet was supplied to the region that many of the attacks on the Muslim minority occurred, in part because certain videos were allowed to be put onto the internet, which allowed or which promoted or incited violence. And I know that we all hope that the big tech companies who allow Facebook or Twitter or any of those platforms, that they take responsibility for some of the content which is on those platforms, so that some of our more isolated communities don't see something and become even more incited. So an existing prejudice could flare up because of what's being watched on the internet. Having said that, of course, we don't think it's a very good idea in a conflict situation where the military is involved at the moment to stop the internet, because people need to communicate with each other and we need to know that people are safe. So I would call for the responsible use of the internet, but nevertheless, the importance of having communications, but having true communications, not misinformation, not allowing people to put up what they like, which could lead to further conflict and further violence. Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. I'll leave it there, and I look forward very much to hearing our three other contributors.
Thank you, Honourable Member of Parliament, for your, I would say, well-rounded response to the situation evolving on the ground. And I was not myself aware, because it's early in the morning in Canada, that there was a breaking news with fresh election. So I would try to gather more information as we speak. Thank you once again, Honourable Member of Parliament. So, dear audience, let's move to Mr. Shahidul Haque, and he was at the helm of many of the events that unfolded during his tenure in the Foreign Ministry in Bangladesh, and we are indeed very honored to have him on board today. So, Mr. Shahidul Haque, the floor is yours, sir. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? First of all, thanks for inviting me. The CRRIC, in particular, Dr. Kausar and Dr. Muhyiddin. Excellency High Commissioner Dr. Khalillur Rahman, who is a brother and a colleague, more a brother than a colleague, because we have served together in many places and done a lot of things together for people of Bangladesh. So I'm very proud to see him as a High Commissioner to Canada. And I actually subscribe the thing that he have said. Now, let me also, Dr. Kausar, congratulate you for focusing on the international community can do. So I will not go into many details. I'll focus on that. But before doing it, let me just flag what happened after the so-called democracy took over in Myanmar. That's very important. Then you'll understand where from things are coming. The first thing that happened is there was after 2015-16 election, there was a military-backed civilian government, and Aung San Suu Kyi, whom I call General's daughter, took over as a head, and she wanted to remain in power, whatever may comes. So So it was a very good team that was running till it collapsed. Now that's the second part. Second, the Burmese military, which was a pariah military globally, never invited before 2011, now invited in any exercises, peacekeeping operations and all of a sudden got red carpet receptions everywhere, including in United States, UK, just name one. So they realized that they should have done it much earlier, this so-called civilian government in power. So that happened. And that also gave them a lot of access to things which they didn't know, including buying of arms. I have a list from the CRRIC journal, and you'll be astonished to see who did not sell major equipments. I'm not talking about rifles and pistols and bullets. I'm talking about platforms. I'm talking about aircraft. I'm talking about big guns. Everyone sold, both Western world and that was the time. I think the military got so confident, they said, let's fix the history of 1942 and let's get this bugger called Rohingyas out of our country. So the third thing they did, they committed a genocide, and I think they almost got away with it. They almost got away with it. How can the world continue to do business as usual with a state which has been prima facie identified as a genocidal government? I mean, just think of the Hitler government, and you'll see that. So this is what has happened. In the name of business as usual, in the name of democracy, we actually all of us promoted a monster in our neighborhood, and who thought that government can get away doing anything. So let me give credit to the Myanmar military civilian government that they have deceived the whole world very nicely, and they continue to do so. That is one of the things that fresh elections comes about. Number one. Number two is, in the process, they have destabilized the whole region. Destabilized the whole region. They have to understand it. It has a long-term implications. There are 25 insurgents group fighting against the military, and despite military's call, they have said, we don't support this, and we will continue to fight the military. And the third thing, and then I'll go into the international issue. Even if democracy returns, and we all are again looking at pseudo democracy installed in Myanmar, and then hope that we have done a big job of restoring democracy. That doesn't mean that the Rohingyas will get back their rights. So that's the other thing. So are we saying that we'll accept democracy at the cost of genocide? Is that what the whole world wants? So that's a big question that with which I will go into the expectations. Now, our expectation, it reminds me, in 2008, there was a Security Council team, all members of the Security Council, except Soviet Union, Russia, came to Cox's Bazar, and we give them one pager. And because it was focusing on international kind of what international community can do, so I pulled that out one pager, which we handed over to the chair, who is the Polish ambassador. And looking at it, I said nothing has been done actually over the last 3-4 years, except some of our countries who pushed it to the court. Now, first thing we want, no more business as usual, no more deception. If you want a democracy, let's see a democracy. Democracy will start with human rights of your minority. I was so happy when Council was saying, a lot of things has happened in this land, and we deeply respect that. We want that here. So that's one. And that brings me to the whole issue of, still there are countries who do not recognize the new government, but, saying that it's all right. They will bring democracy. So, except New Zealand. So let's come out, say spade a spade. That with this government, we have no political or high diplomatic relationship. How many have said, except New Zealand? No one else. Active Security Council. Security Council has really did it. Security Council has become useless. They even could not condemn this. They even didn't say coup. They say seizure of power. Come on. if we cannot, as a Security Council member, look at the stability and peace and say this is a coup, what we can expect from the Security Council? So we go to the Secretary General, who was very clear. Just don't support military coup. We don't accept it. He was very clear in his statement. And now we also, I think time has come, we say no justice, no rights, no democracy. As simple as that. I'm not talking about only Rohingyas, I'm talking about the whole country. Now, the third is that immediate reintroduction of strong sanction regime. Now, it's very unfortunate that despite our strong campaign in 2011 and 12 and 13, all the Western world all of a sudden lifted all the sanctions. In fact, I remember in 2013 visiting State Department and saying, could we do gradually lifting after? Because in 2013 we had about 300,000 Rohingya or so, and we are contemplating some more coming in. So we said, help us to resolve this human rights problem. But that was not in their national interest. So they didn't do anything. Let's be very clear. So if you want to fix this, every crisis brings an opportunity. This is an opportunity, but you have to really sacrifice a little bit of your national interest. It is not only Bangladesh and Bangladeshi people who will continue to make sacrifices, and you only recognize the contribution and put a period after that. That's not expected of it. So, in terms of immediate imposition of sanction, which the United States has done, cessation of all financial transaction and relations with the United States. And in this regard, I would urge all of us, those who are interested, to look at the Justice for Peace report of 15 September. You'll be horrified. Even the IMF, a day before the coup, when we knew that something is going to happen, the IMF made a substantive financial contribution to the Myanmar government. Can you believe this? Couldn't they have waited for another week? We knew 7 days before there will be a military takeover. It was very clear. But could IMF not read it? Didn't they have an office there? The World Bank? So, what are we actually talking about? I don't think we're very serious about Rohingyas' right or genocide. So that's one. Second is that I'm very happy that the United States is the only country which stopped selling arms to the Myanmar government. Not only that, after 2007, some of their Myanmar officials were undergoing military training in UK, and all of them were discontinued and sent back. So congratulations on that. So we want all kinds of arms embargo. Second, cessation of economic links, FDI. We know that they said, we will not do that, but the Chinese will bring it. Let the Chinese take the burden, because time will come when those who are continue to have a relationship with a genocidal government will also be put in front of the ICJ and ICC to questions, the way we know that Ambassador Rosenthal's report now questioning in 2012-13 whole UN system's role, which could not prevent a genocide. So these will come. It's a question of day. So I'm coming to an end. I also like to recognize Singapore and Japan, private sector. They have discontinued some of the big investment. Congratulations. We would like more and more of those. And the last but not the least, the safe zone, which our Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina proposed in 2017 under the bigger umbrella of right to responsibility to protect. Let's bring the whole thing in, make whole Myanmar safe. Now it's not only Rakhine, the whole Myanmar need to be safe. Possibly a resolution need to also be brought in, uniting for peace, because Security Council cannot function. Let's bring in the UNGA, which we have seen in 71, in 69, in 51 in the Korean conflict. So maybe Security Council is defunct on this issue at least. So bring back the Uniting for Peace resolution in the UNGA. And I'm very happy that Honourable Member, the British Parliament, Catherine West, is with us. They are the pen holder of Myanmar in the Security Council. They can do and undo a lot of things. Congratulations, you have done a lot. I know it's very complex chemistry, but this is the time. Crisis is the time to push it. Look what has happened in 1 week. The government has come back and said that, here goes the election. Here goes the election. Why? So, I'll finish with one. I think it's a natural justice. The thing that has happened to the Rohingya community, and we have seen, and Ambassador Khalillur is here, we have seen what a horrific crime that has been committed against them. Isn't there somebody sitting on the top of the heaven looking at it? This is called natural justice. You have created a monster, see what happens. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shahidul Haque. I would say a lot of very, I would say, deep questions that he asked to all of us and to the international community in particular. And one of the questions that is kind of resonating with me this morning is that international communities should be asked whether they would accept democracy in lieu of a genocide. I think these questions need to be answered in earnest. So, the audience, let's move to our last speaker and very important speaker, a Rohingya himself, Mr. Khin, very widely traveled and very much popular in advancing Rohingya rights in the international community. Mr. Khin, floor is yours, sir. Just unmute the mic, kindly.
First of all, I would like to express many thanks to Conflict and Resilience Research Institute and Brother Dr. Kausar and Brother Muhyiddin inviting me. It is a very important and timely event you are hosting. First of all, what we are seeing in Burma, this is very shocking in last few days. And as a Rohingya, we condemn the coup and we inspired by the protesters bravely standing against the military coup in Myanmar. We stand in solidarity with the people of Burma, who are calling for establishment of a Myanmar democratic system that is truly inclusive of the Rohingya and other persecuted minorities. As a members of Rohingya community, as a Rohingya like myself and others, we directly experience and witness the systematic removal of Rohingya rights and genocidal destruction of our people in Myanmar. There are recent nationwide rights violations perpetrated by the military since the coup have been the reality for the Rohingya in Rakhine State for decades. Due to our collective experience of persecution, we deeply understand the importance of human rights for all, and we stand in solidarity with our brothers and sisters across in Myanmar. When I speak to friends and family back home in Rakhine State, a fear of an anxiety is palpable. Many Rohingya saw family members being killed and villages burned to the ground just a few years ago. Older generation member like the Temedo similar bloody clearance operation in Rakhine State 1978, 1990, with the same military now full control of the country. What is to stop them doing it again? At the same time, the army might feel emboldened to step up attacks, other conflict zone, where it has been incredibly accused of war crimes, and including in Shan and Kachin State. Military is notoriously thin-skinned when it comes to the criticism. The military rule in Myanmar with an iron fist for decades, controlling all media, jailing thousands of people who dare to speak out. Respect for freedom of expression was spiraling downward in Myanmar already before the coup. It is likely to get worse. The events, what's happened last few weeks, is a wake-up call for both home and abroad. For Aung San Suu Kyi, it marks the final step of her dramatic fall from grace. In 2015, myself and thousands of Rohingya cheered when NLD swept general election. We have since watched how she became the military apologist and even actively defended the military against genocide charges International Court of Justice. As she languishes in detention, awaiting trial on ludicrous charges of illegally importing walkie-talkies, one can only hope she is rethinking her decision to trust the military. This is a lesson for the international community must now learn too. Since Myanmar's political opening in 2011, too many countries were too quick embrace, the military-led reforms, the poor funding into trainings and other forms of engagement, ignoring the reports of military ongoing, atrocity crimes, minority areas warning signs of impending genocidal violence against Rohingya. The event of this week have made, the event of first week of February have made abundantly clear that military only interested in power. A truly democratic Myanmar is only possible when military returns to their barracks. Effect the world must accept. International community must act before the coup becomes normalized. There must be sustained pressure on the military government. Action must come from Western capitals, but also from not only from Western capitals. I mentioned here ASEAN, China, India, Japan. A state must use every tool in the box. Targeted sanction, military-owned businesses, and global arms embargo. At the same time, I want to point out here that atrocity crimes, military are by the perpetrator. Only justice can break this cycle, impunity and violence. The states must throw their weight behind the International Court of Justice and other bodies that are working for the accountability. The people of Myanmar, regardless of ethnicity, politics, or religion, deserve free and fair society where everyone can live in dignity. We must strive to create a new inclusive Myanmar, that is genuinely free of military influence. Importantly, we must build back better. We cannot forget the Rohingya and other ethnic minorities were mostly disenfranchised in 2020 elections. Rohingya have a strip of their nationality for decades. Such dehumanizing discrimination is no basis for peaceful and modern state. International community must invest in programs that focus on direct empowerment of Rohingya and other ethnic minorities, including through reinstatement of cross-border programs that are not controlled by NEPIDO, as these programs are best long-term investment to achieving more representative politics, regardless of the political majority in place. As the protests unfold, we see evidence more, inclusive Myanmar is possible. Both Rohingyas and Rohingyas are showing solidarity, and for the first time, we are seeing Myanmar people expressing empathy for the plight of Rohingya. We welcome this. I hope these signs of unity are foreshadowing of the inclusion that a future Myanmar could enjoy. However, it must be clear that we do not desire to return to the status quo. Rohingya have suffered genocide and extreme restriction on basic rights under previous facade of democracy represented by NLD and Aung San Suu Kyi. Inclusive democracy in Myanmar fundamentally means ensuring basic human rights for all, guaranteeing that all are included as equal partners in a democratic system. Regarding our repatriation, we have listened last few days ago from the military commander-in-chief, but we do not know how far they will move ahead for this repatriation. Same time, international community pressure is, and really effective pressure should push on military that is still ongoing genocide in Rakhine State and situation need to be changed and restoring the rights of Rohingya, then repatriation can happen. For truly inclusive democracy to become a reality, international community and allies of Myanmar They have to influence 2008 constitution must be abolished, an inclusive democratic framework, ensuring militaries is under the control, ensure that the military is under the control of civilian must be established. The discriminatory citizenship status must be removed. Full citizenship of Rohingya and other minorities, state-led minorities in Myanmar must be restored. There must be justice and accountability for those who have committed enable human rights violation. There must be mechanism of protection put in place for those still at risk. Restriction on Rohingya and other minorities, such as restriction of freedom of movement, marriage, religion, and expression, association, must be lifted. There must be repatriation for the Rohingya lands and possessions that were destroyed or stolen. The apartheid system of education, healthcare, commerce, and public administration in Rakhine State must be dismantled. International community should support international code of justice. The cases where we're looking at still the provisional measures violating there, and we want to see, especially here, UK and other countries to join these cases. And we have not seen any country yet except Canada and Holland. And UK and other countries, this is right time to intervene, to call, to join with justice for Rohingyas and other minorities in Burma. Because if these cases are coming up forward and other countries supporting, that means too much pressure to the military that can stop further abuses and genocidal acts against Rohingya. That is very important. And also, this is important that international community approach need to shift. Because I'm quite agree, Honourable brother, my brother Shahidul Haque, what he mentioned, international community just jumping on military, got lifted up all sanctions, in 2010 to 2020. That was very, it's not a democracy. It's just a so-called democracy where we have seen Naypyidaw, Yangon, and Mandalay, some freedom of expression and some human rights abuses stopped. People did not look as a whole country. Western side of the country, Rohingya people are facing genocide. You all have neglected it. And international community have supported funding where Rohingya were excluded. In 2014 census, UN and other countries supported for the census where Rohingya were excluded. So this is a big failure from international community. They did not do anything when things happen. This is now returned back to the military that encouraged them. I was traveling many places, and I was talking about it last 3-4 years, but no one tried to listen it. No one tried to understand it. Still jumping on the narrative of Aung San Suu Kyi, what she is trying to work with the military. One thing reminder here, Aung San Suu Kyi, she made ally those criminals who committed genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. These kind of allies, they can hand back to you. Now they arrested her, those kind of cases, like with the walkie-talkies holding up, So there is no such ally. Sadly, this is a reminder for everyone. You cannot ally those criminals who committed genocide, war crimes, and crimes against humanity to the people. We felt that we Rohingya have been crying from international community what is happening to us, but still nobody taking that much action. We need your solidarity. We need your support. We want to see not only Rohingya as a whole country, freedom for all, justice for all. We do not want to see just in Naypyidaw, Yangon, and Mandalay bring back those democracy, and again, the other minorities, Rohingyas, are facing genocide. International community must reset their policies. That's what I want to remind here. And sorry, I'm taking too long, brother. So I'm stopping here. Thank you very much. And I hope you will do your best, particularly whenever you talk Burma, Rohingya genocide is still ongoing. You cannot forget that. When you talk about 50 million people, human rights and democracy, first thing, about 1 million over Rohingya fled from Bangladesh. Their house has been burned down. Thousands of Rohingya have been killed, and thousands of Rohingya women raped, and 600,000 right now in Arkhana state, their lives are at risk. That should not be forgotten. That is very important point we want to highlight here. So then we hope that your support, solidarity will help, will stop genocide against Rohingya, and democracy in Burma one day will come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Tunkin, for, I would say, very moving appeals to the international community. The sordid affairs that befell on Rohingyas must not be forgotten, and we must step up in terms of our responses. Thank you for doing it, Brother Tunkin. Dear audience, we are at the last end of our session. It is in our clock is nearly 1 hour, but we promised a very brief Q&A session, and we have decided to skip the last part, taking questions from the audience. So I'll hand over the floor to Dr. Hilal Mohiuddin, and I'll be requesting him to kindly keep it brief, at least one question per panelist, maybe a wiser allotment, just to be conscious about time. So Dr. Hilal, please take over, and floor is yours, sir.
Okay, we sincerely thank our distinguished panelists, His Excellency Bangladesh High Commissioner to Canada, Dr. Khalillur Rahman, and Honourable Catherine West MP, and Mr. Shahidul Haque, former Foreign Secretary, Bangladesh Foreign Secretary, Mr. Tunkin, and the audiences. The discussion is so engaging at this moment. I think we should allow some more time if it's possible. I am requesting Dr. Kausar to allow us more time, because there are more questions to answer. And today's session is especially important, for we are trying to attract the side of the international community to focus on the main problems. And most of the problems are discussed quite eloquently in this discussion session. And we need some guideline as well, and some way out from the discussions. I am just wrapping it up very quickly, the points that are made here. Number one, His Excellency Bangladesh High Commissioner to Canada clearly mentioned about accountability, and I think this is one of the most important part that we need to focus on. And one of his important ideas that we need to have a study that will be itemized. It would be kind of sectoral sort of study that would clearly distinguish all the areas that are being violated, and the violence are perpetrated in areas, and after effects, all of the after effects. The most important insights, I believe, came from Mr. Shahidul Haque, that we need sanctions and bans. There is no alternative to that. Special arms embargo, because Bangladesh can't afford staying with a monster next door. That's the main point. And most of the points are coming in with the discussion from Honourable Catherine West MP, that now United Kingdom is also trying to be more vocal about joining the ICJ process. Especially her party, Liberal Party, is now actively advocating for the UK government to take active role in this process, because that will make a big change for sure. And last one is about Tunkin. I really agree with Mr. Tunkin's point that there is some optimism. If especially we are feeling optimistic because of the movement that are taking place at this moment in Myanmar and all over the world. At last, the world probably realized that, okay, they did a big mistake during 2010 to 2020, just to think about a rosy future, that it would be a very good marriage, but it never did, and it never will. They should have understood that quite ahead of time. Now the economic interest is so intertwined with it. We see that the military industrial complex is very strong there, and military is controlling the economy in such a way. The international communities are engaged in all kinds of businesses with them. We know that 60 international big multinational corporations have already invested in these countries. Japan has investment, but now it is a positive thing, positive sign that Japan is tracking back, and it is not really going to support to that extent like before this country. Singapore has big investment, and Singapore is also coming back from that investment, and it is becoming more humanitarian focused, that no, probably they have gone too far, and this is the right time just to have everything in grief, especially to support the Myanmar people's expectation and hope that we need democracy. The most important part is that the Myanmar people have risen, and there is a prospect of mass upsurge. So probably this is the best time, and sanction would be the best solution at this moment. So my question first to Mr. Shahidul Haque, because you have really captured all the points that are um, very important at this moment for the international communities to hear. That sanction, there is no other alternative to sanction. And you have also mentioned about the UN Security Council's failure, and you are expecting that UNDA should be re-established. Could you please just excuse me, I am having some problem, morning time problem. It is early morning in Canada. uh, so UNDA process, how that can be established, if you shed some light on that, that would be really helpful for us.
Thank you very much. I'll try and be brief. Now, in terms of sanctions, sanctions can come from individual countries. In fact, the United States has already taken the lead in terms of imposing sanctions, and sanctions of various kinds and nature. It would have been really nice if the Security Council would have come together and put a kind of UN-led sanction, which has happened in the past. But in this case, which is highly unlikely, and we know what. So I'm sort of more inclined to keep UN Security Council wherever they are right now, and look at the bilateral initiative. So, which is United States, European Union, because GSP is still functioning. So, I thought the first day the European Union will pass a resolution saying that GSP is stopped. So, even a coup cannot sort of discourage you from doing a business. And that's why I said that business as usual. So, that's one. Individual companies, it has already, I know Japanese company has done, the Singaporean has done, it's a big Singaporean company. And why we are asking for sanctions. Now, to begin with, why there was so much of an FDI and election, and whom are we actually doing business in Myanmar? It is military. There's no holding company in Myanmar which doesn't belong to the military generals or their son or two daughters or the cousins and the uncles and aunties. The whole Myanmar economic holding, which literally owns the country, is run by the military. So what this Western world was doing business with military, and there are UN reports. It's not that I'm sort of bringing it out. So that's something can be done. World Bank and IMF should have been aware long, especially IMF. It's just a day before they gave millions of dollars to the government, and where this money is now going, this money is being used, I'm sure, against the people of Myanmar. So so who is your agent of change in Myanmar? Is it military? Yes, and I have always suggested there is very little difference, if at all any, between Aung San Suu Kyi and the military. She is always, I say, general's daughter, and I had an experience of interacting with her and the general quite intensively, and I don't find any difference. Now, this I'll just stop there. I wish the bilateral sanctions comes in the form of the way you have really strangulated Iran or North Korea. Let's bring that kind of a strong financial sanctions. Anyone doing business will also be sanctioned. The way we cannot do business, and as a foreign secretary, I know how much effort we have put in to make sure that we don't go to those countries in terms of business. Although possibly it's a much better deal that we were getting in, but we just couldn't because of the sanction, and we knew that this will also hurt our bigger industries and business. So let's bring that in. Let's bring the regime, and United States taking the lead, especially Biden himself. That's something important. Others could follow. The other one is that, let's be very frank. Genocide has been committed in Myanmar against Rohingyas. Let's not play with the word. In 2018, United States has done a very extensive study. Very extensive study. I know that. And at that moment, they went to the White House, and given it to the then president, saying that it is a genocide. Do you think that we should declare genocide? Because if you call it as genocide, then you have really gone into all kinds of sanctions. So they fall short of it, and they said it is ethnic cleansing. Now that's why the Biden government has instituted an interagency committee to look at the report again and see. So what I'm saying, the crisis possibly has brought some windows of opportunity, but we have to use it. It can no longer be business. Let's not try. And I see democracy has become a big blanket, and you put everything beneath that, justify everything under the name of democracy. I still remember, let's take 2 minutes. Whenever I used to say these things in the negotiation with the Western world, they say, no, look, Mr. Shahid, don't push it. If you push it too much, they will ousted Aung San Suu Kyi. I said it's a question of time when she'd be ousted. And it was almost a chronicle that unfolded. We knew that it will happen. The question is when it will happen. And exactly that has happened. So now you should be able to say that, it is A team and B team. Now the A team is playing. So far B team was playing. And B team said, look, we are moving into genocide kind of issue. So let the A team play, which is the general's team, and the B team take a rest at the palace. Is it the case? We're also sure of that. We don't know. We don't know. Is it A team, B team or not? Is the whole thing to hide the whole issue of genocide? Possibly. So sanction could really bring in huge impact, but people will raise questions that, they will all go to China. Fine, let them go to China. But then at least we and the Rohingya people will be able to say that whole world is with us. There was one world with us. Let's do that. You have done it in another place. You have done it in Iran. You have done it in North Korea. You're about to do it in Yemen. These poor Yemenis people, including describing them as terrorists. I've served in Yemen, so I know these people are not terrorists. They can be anything. All of them carry guns. That doesn't make them terrorists. So that's the one. European Union, get rid of GSP right now. At least show us one example where you really believe in human rights. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Now I will move to Honourable Catherine West MP. My question is very specific to you. What is the progress of your move, your advocacy about UK's joining in the ICJ process with Canada and Netherlands? And I will also ask another question, especially for your insight, just to know about the P2P process, right to P process, R2P process, so that we can think about a safe zone that Mr. Shahidul Haque clearly mentioned, again, that it is one of the important things. And CRRIC, in our last published book last year, we also mentioned about the possibility of a safe zone that might be an at least interim solution. So this is another important point that came out today. I would request also Khin and His Excellency Bangladesh High Commissioner to Canada, Dr. Khalillur Rahman as well, to focus on that, whether that would be possible. So, Honourable Catherine West MP, please, your insight and your reflection, please.
Thank you very much. And the current position is that the UK and the Netherlands have offered legal expertise. But of course, in the light of the last 2 weeks, all of that is on hold because there's been a lot of communications problems. For example, trying to communicate with people who the government was communicating with before, because sometimes there's no internet. And of course, the whole situation now is on the streets. But nevertheless, in terms of the medium term, the UK and the Labour opposition will continue to push the government towards that legal expertise and bringing accountability. I think when Khin was speaking, we really got a sense of that feeling that people are acting with impunity, that the military is acting with impunity. They just know they can get away with this. And Tun was quite right to say and to challenge that we need to bring greater accountability into our international system. And so through those legal expertise options, we can offer that as the UK, but perhaps even more importantly, before that legal process can begin, is to try and stop the brutality of the attacks. So anything which we as an international community can do to try and get a cessation of violence on the streets at the moment, tonight, and overnight, and for the next few weeks, so that at least we can begin to have communication, to talk, to find out what's going on. I know that our reporters are basically reporting through Bangkok. So they themselves have said on our television programs that they're finding it really difficult to get information. So the first thing is really to find out what's happening, and to call for the police brutality to stop and the army brutality to stop, because just sending tanks in is going to potentially lead to a loss of life and terror. And of course, we know this is the tactic which is being used. But while that's going on, it's very difficult to pursue further legal procedures or, funding arrangements or discussions. We need to have that ceasefire. We need to have that cessation of violence and brutality. So that's step one. And in the medium term, the UK then needs to use its position as penholder to bring together the international partners. And as Mr. Haque said, it's wonderful that we have got a more attentive US. The Biden administration was very quick out of the blocks to condemn the violence and the brutality by the army, the Tatmadaw, and to once again have the US focusing on this situation, focusing on what can be done, and trying to get all the key players around the table. And that is a huge step forward compared to, 6 months ago, when it would have been very difficult to have really got the attention of the US administration. And I'm really pleased about that. So if the UK and the US can at least begin that conversation, we know that we've got the support of New Zealand. We know we've got the support of Holland and some of the other countries, but we need now to get many more supporters really pushing on any of the private sector partners who are still involved in Myanmar. We know that people are living in extreme poverty there. We know that these sanctions will work, but it needs to be quick, it needs to be fast, so that there is a sense of there are consequences, and if you do the wrong thing, there will be accountability and there will be justice for those who are under attack.
Okay, thank you very much, Honourable MP. Just the last question again, if you reflect for just only 1 minute, how to convince Russia, China, India, and Japan to become more humanitarian and more proactive, especially after this coup d'etat this time?
Good question. On the Russia piece, obviously, once again, the US has begun again to speak to Russia, mainly around weapons proliferation and trying to get back to the discussions around how we work in a multilateral way. My reading of that from external to Washington and the Kremlin is that there appears to be a conversation, which is a good thing, and it appears to be getting back to some kind of normality, whereas it was always a bit curious to understand Mr. Trump's position on that. And I really hope that through that conversation, through those partnerships which are developing, there can be a discussion about third parties, and also that we can try and encourage Russia and China to come to the table. We know that China is intimately involved in the way that the economy in Myanmar works. A lot of infrastructure spend, and of course, lots of bilateral communications there. And I would like the UK government, but also the US, to talk to China about what can be done. I personally think it's very destabilizing for China internally to have this happening on the border. So really, it's in China's interest for the violence to stop. And I would hope that we can, these sorts of conversations and anything that our High Commissioner can say to any colleagues that he knows from China or Russia, so that we can use the existing channels that we do have through diplomacy to encourage China to take a firm stance on this, because I don't believe it's in anyone's interests, even China's either financial or internal disruptive forces, for this to be happening at the moment. We also know that there's a very lively trade in terms of natural resources and manufactured goods across that border, the China-Myanmar border. So there's a real reason for China to stop this and to face up to this violence and to really play a role, to step up and play a role. Very briefly on India, you'd be aware that the UK is moving post-Brexit towards a conversation about a kind of Indo-Pacific style of trade arrangements. This is medium to long term, so it doesn't necessarily mean today, but in another sense, why wait any longer when we know that there are people who are at risk of death because of the way that the army is working? So perhaps now is the time for the UK to pick up the phone to India, knowing that it wanted to anyway, and discuss this situation with them and try and get them to apply pressure as well.
Thank you once again, Honourable Catherine West MP. Dr. Kausar, if you just allow me just to ask my very last question for 1 minute. It's about putting equal emphasis on two things, right? Accountability and repatriation of the Rohingyas. So my question to all the panelists, how there could be a good balance between these two, how we could put these two agenda with equal emphasis, that both are equally important. One is repatriation of the Rohingyas and the other one is accountability. And under that accountability broader umbrella, we could put everything, ICC processes, and then peace, R2P processes, and sanctions and everything. So everything will go under accountability broader umbrella. And the other one, we need to focus mostly on repatriation of Rohingyas, because that's the biggest crucial problem for Bangladesh. We need to have a good solution to that as well. And if you reflect on that just for 1 minute each person, that would be better. Mr. Tunkhin, I would request you a little to focus more, and then Dr. Kausar will jump in for sure. He's just waiting to jump into the session.
No, it's such an engaging discussion today that is difficult to control time and voice. But I do apologize to the honourable members of the panel today that we are overshooting time. But I would like to honor Dr. Hilal's question, of course. But what I would like to do is that traditionally we go, before we close, we say last words from the panelists. So I would like to invoke that part now. So it would be our last part of discussion, and where Mr. Tunkhin and His Excellency High Commissioner would be expected to kindly, wrap up their last words and answer Dr. Hilal's question together. That will be highly appreciated. So we'll go in the order: Mr. Tunkhin first, then Mr. Shahidul Haque, then Honourable Member of Parliament Catherine West, and finally we would listen to His Excellency the High Commissioner of Bangladesh to Canada. Mr. Tunkhin, please go ahead, and this will be our final roundup. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Yes, my last message, that is, I visited many times to the camps, and I spent 4 weeks when thousands of Rohingya were fleeing in 2017, August and September. One word I heard from the genocide survivors is one word: we want justice. So what justice mean? They want to return to they want to get justice. Who killed their sons, slaughtered in front of in front of their father, and women being raped in front of their parents, and so many children burned alive. So no matter what situation we want justice from who are accountable for these crimes, genocide, and crime against humanity. So Rohingya faced, and this is very important. We want to bring those who are responsible. Secondly, important thing is what happening in Burma. International community must not forget that when they pressure, they have to reset a new policy, inclusive democracy, and must not forget the coup leader perpetrated genocide, and that is the coup leader now in power. So whenever they talk about the coup or whenever they talk about democracy, that genocide need to stop first and must provide equal rights to Rohingyas and other minorities. Thank you.
Mr. Shahidul, sir, floor is yours now. Do you have a last word? Sir, your mic is muted. Oh.
I think very good question from Dr. Hilal in terms of how balance is brought between accountability and justice on one hand, and the other hand is the repatriation of Rohingyas to their homeland. I think these are interdependent processes. So for them, it's not only return but return with rights, because they have returned in the past, late 70s, early 90s, but they have never actually returned with rights. So that's very fundamental, and that can only be established through a accountability and justice process, because I think bilaterally we have tried and we have exhausted almost everything in terms of returning them with rights. So possibly time has come, and that's why our Honourable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has been so bold and humanitarian in terms of making putting a stake into the accountability area. Without Bangladesh's support, there would have been no accountability process, whether it's the ICC, ICJ, whatever you name. You can name all countries, but if Bangladesh didn't agree, our leadership didn't agree, that would continue to have remained a closed portfolio. So let's recognize that, and I think the government continues to pursue that. Civil society is in line with it. So accountability and justice is gradually becoming the core, because return with rights is critical, and that will only happen through the court, or if the whole world, the Western world and the Eastern world, unites and ensures to do something. But I hope that that might backfire. So the best process is to go to the court and get a verdict and get this military learn their lesson. Thank you. And so is the Aung San Suu Kyi.
Thank you, sir. Honourable Member of Parliament, Captain West.
I think Mr. Tun Khin put it so well when he said the first thing is rights, because there was always the discrimination against the minority, Muslim minority. Do you remember back with the elections in 2015-16? We all, as international partners, put pressure on Burma, and we said you can't have an election and not allow people to vote. You can't have an election, not allow certain people to stand for election. We have to have equality before the law and equality within a democracy. Otherwise, it's not really democracy. And yet it was ignored. And we had similar arguments that we heard when Dorsu came and made her representations in international fora. And we do have to challenge this. Either it's a democracy or it's not. You can't be half pregnant, and I think we have to insist on this. And actually, I've been really pleased to see that in our own parliament, it's not just our Muslim MPs, but it's all MPs across the House who see that this was discriminatory back in 2015-16. And at the time, of course, it was a different government. It was the Cameron government, not Mr. Johnson's government. But we were at one in terms of the rights, the basic rights before an election, that everybody have the right to stand, and that everybody, and really that goes to the heart of it, because once you have those basic discrimination ruled out, then you can start talking about equal access to health, equal access to education, equal access to psychological therapies, equal access to legislation to fight for, the war crimes, because we know that there was terrible murder, rape, all the things which happen once a war starts. And of course, discussing what does good integration look like. And we know that there are lots of different peace processes across the world that we can learn from. Colombia, Ireland, Cyprus, which is still not resolved. But, you know, there are still issues where you have two communities who somehow manage to live side by side. And it's very much the international community who is at the heart of trying to referee what that looks like. And it can be done. It takes an awful lot of resource and an awful lot of support, but it is possible. And that's what we have to strive for, and never to give up until we get that sense of justice, that each human being is equal within the law and within a democracy. And it's been a fantastic panel, and I've learned a lot. And a big thank you once again to the role which Bangladesh is playing in providing a stable and safe place for the Rohingya in Cox's Bazar, and for the wonderful partnership which British UK aid can play in terms of, you know, working together for this temporary solution, but also having the vision for an equal future.
Thank you, Honourable Member of Parliament, for a wonderful conclusion of the whole summation of our discussion today. Now we'll go back to His Excellency, the High Commissioner of Bangladesh, Dr. Khalillur Rahman, to conclude by saying some of his and sharing some of his wisdoms this morning. Sir, floor is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Kausar, once again to come back to me. I think the solutions to the crisis have been, you know, eloquently spelled out by the distinguished panelists, so I won't be going to that. I just like to focus on a couple of points. First of all, you know, Honourable Ahmed Lord has been promoting and proposing the multi-year planning for sustaining Rohingyas in Bangladesh, who is Bangladesh strongly reject. We have rejected and will always reject, while we welcome the humanitarian support. This is one. And if we do that, if we go for 10-year planning, you are basically discouraging repetition. You are basically encouraging the Myanmar regime not to take them back. Oh, we have 10 years time. So this is a wrong policy West is pursuing. So that must be stopped. Secondly, Ambassador Shahidul has clearly spelled out that, you know, how you are emboldening, you know, this Myanmar regime. And Aung San Suu Kyi has been a partner in crime. West, unfortunately, is still obsessed with her. She has shown her true colors in the International Court of Justice by defending the Zhans and herself, against the crime against humanity. So West must now, you know, forget her and look for a true democratic regime that can truly be democratic, as Mr. Khin has said. I really welcome, you know, UK's move to support this, you know, accountability aspect, that support the, you know, case in ICJ. But okay, that's fine. Moral, ethical support to legal is fine. But we also need the financial contribution. You know, Canada basically now focusing on this humanitarian aspect. So in my first meeting, I told the Global Affairs, you know, Canada, that no, you have to also focus now in providing financial contribution. This is a country that is known as the main proponent for global peace and security, rule of law, human rights protection promotion. How you can still supporting a regime in Myanmar? You know, unfortunately, the Canadian pension fund, like many investors in UK, you are promoting your investment in Myanmar. You are sending, you know, this mixed messages. So basically, I think West is really not very sincere for the true solution to the crisis and for the early repetition of the Rohingyas. About safe zone, I think when Ambassador Haque was Foreign Secretary in the 74th ENG, our Prime Minister, you know, spelled out 4 points. The third point, you know, talks about the safe zone. The international community must compel Myanmar guarantee security and safety for the Rohingyas by deploying civilian monitors from international community in the Rakhine state, so that true secure environment sustainable environment is created there. So that is the duty of the West, and we are working with China. We don't know. And lastly, my last point, as I said, that there should be itemized, study on the loss and the burden Bangladesh is now sharing, how it has impacted Bangladesh, the overall social and economic development, and jeopardized our security situation. Today West may be happy. Oh, it is the problem in this, in Bangladesh, in that state. But I'm telling you, it will be a global security issue in years to come. It is not only for the region. Ambassador Haque only confined himself within the region, but it will go beyond region. And West will pay for this. Time will come when West has to pay for the negligence, ignorance, or deliberate, I should say, deliberate unwillingness to resolve the crisis. And I think we really try hard to have a true democratic regime in Myanmar. I just end by quoting our Honourable Prime Minister, which she said in the 75th of US General Assembly, that more than 3 years have elapsed. Regrettably, not a single Rohingya could be repatriated. The problem was created by Myanmar, and its solution must be found in Myanmar. I request the international community to play a more effective role for a solution to the crisis. And what UK, the Honourable Lord Ahmed, is proposing, I think it is not an effective role. By proposing the multi-year planning for sustaining Rohingyas in Bangladesh, we are doing enough. We welcome this humanitarian support, but we also want them to really play a big role in this accountability aspect, to hold them accountable in the International Court of Justice by not only providing moral and ethical support or providing some legal assistance. You have to come up with your financial contribution there. That is what I told my Canadian colleagues here. And you are a policy maker, and you must please raise this in a parliament, that they should also come up with the financial support to help the case. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, sir, for your beautiful conclusion. So, dear audience, we do apologize for worshipping our planned session today, but the session was so engaging, it was difficult to cut short the trail of our thinkings abruptly and just to close the session. So please accept our apology. And in conclusion, dear audience, we have heard from our esteemed panelists a long list of what to do. And this is high time that international community, the way we perceive the term itself, and number of players in it, including major players like United Kingdom and United States of America, including our own country, Canada, we would like to see more effective actions in terms of accountability, justice, and human rights, and including financial help from all these players. And I would like to end today by saying that this is a very, I would say, important issue that we, from Conflict and Resilience Research Institute, continue facilitating dialogue between the and among the policymakers, activists, and scholars, so that we come with a policy and suggestions for long-term and sustainable conflict resolution. And with a happy note, let's look at the future and see our Rohingya brothers and sisters do return to their places of birth with dignity, human rights, and security. So once again, thank you for being with us for 1.5 hours this morning here in Canada, and afternoon in UK, and evening in Dhaka, Bangladesh. Stay safe, stay well, and stay engaged with Rohingya crisis. Goodbye. Thank you.